Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in this great, grand, and glorious world. I am Reverend Wendy Silvers, and you have arrived at this very special Awakened Mother. I'm doing a series on regenerative farming. After learning a bit about it and after seeing the films that have been released about our soil and how important it is to keep our bodies healthy by keeping our soil healthy. And so I've been on this journey with Vandana Shiva and Gabe Brown and the Engleharts to just learn about the best ways that we can take care of our bodies as moms and we can take care of our kids. So today I'm thrilled because I have with me Marni Thompson, who is so accomplished and such an expert and seasoned person who has worked with the soil and can give you such great information. And let me tell you just a little bit about her. She grew up on a family ranch near Townsend, Montana. And after college, she began her career with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Services, where she has worked for 26 years, starting first as a soil conservationist in Miles City, Montana, where she worked on rangeland on large ranches. She then worked for 12 years as a district conservationist in Sheridan, Montana. And during those years, Marni honed her expertise on large stock water pipelines, irrigated pasture, and native rangeland. And it was there that Marni discovered her soil health passion when she watched Ray Archuleta do the slake test. And we're going to talk about the slake test. That burning passion inspired Marni to pursue as much knowledge regarding soil health as possible. She then moved to Great Falls, Montana as the area conservationist for programs assisting 13 field offices and 3 tribal offices in implementing NRCS conservation programs. After 6 years in that position, Marni was able to get back to her technical roots and was the area conservationist for technology and was responsible for technical training for 13 field offices and 3 tribal offices. The transition to the Great Falls area allowed Marni to gain more experience with soil health and dry land cropping, and she became Montana's first soil health specialist. In this role, she is responsible for soil health education, outreach, and training for the state of Montana. And today she's going to share with you so that you, wherever you are, whether you live on a farm or you're in the city or you're in the country, you can take these tools and apply them in your home. Marni and her husband, Jory, have 3 grown children and 2 grandchildren. And I had the honor the other week to see her granddaughter, who's just so precious. And they live in Fort Benton, Montana. And her passion is practicing soil health principles in her no-till garden. She also likes to ride horses, fish, and water ski. So help me welcome to the stage, Marni Thompson. Woo! Hi, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for coming on today and being willing to share all that you know to help families. Mm-hmm. I feel like we're in a very dire place at this time in history. Am I being an alarmist? Is that accurate?
I think so. A couple of years ago, so my husband is a superintendent of schools, and I know he talked about the number of children in kindergarten that had some form of autism or learning disability, and it was like 13 kids out of a class, which is just alarming. And, we're seeing a lot of that, autoimmune disease and all these types of diseases. And there are things that have increased over time. And I really think a lot of it comes back to our environment and our food and what we eat.
Yes. So. Yes, I know the statistics are really high for the rate of autism. It used to be 1 in 55, and then it's 1 in 34, and then 1 in 22. 80% are boys. And it really makes, I mean, as a mom, it really begs the question, like, what's happening?
What's going on, right?
Right. And what's interesting to me, I mean, when you think about it, right, I use the analogy of gardening a lot in the work that I do, because I feel like we're always planting seeds, whether we're doing it, literally or figuratively. And I like to get to the root. Like, what
problem?
Right, exactly. Like, I
Yes.
don't want a Band-Aid. I don't want, oh, well, I think it's this. I'm like, I want to know, what can I do to make sure my child's brain and body are as healthy as her spirit?
Right.
So can you explain what's a soil conservationist?
Soil conservationist works with private landowners on any type of farm resource concern, whether it be their soils, their pastures, animal health, weeds. And so it really is about making their farm or ranch better for them, along with making it more sustainable and healing the soils in a way that we want to. And it helps them in return.
Okay. And then what is the Slake test?
So the Slake test is super cool. You could always do it on YouTube, and I probably will be doing it on my Green Thumb Chronicles also. So you take 2 big cylinders of water, and you put it's called a soil ped. So it's just a clump of soil, and you take one that is in not very good soil health and one that is, and you put them in water. And what happens with the not so good soil is it will fall apart, which means it slakes. And the reason for that is good soil health means it's living. It has living biology in the soil. And so to create good soil health is about making that environment for the biology the best that it can be, so that it provides nutrients for your plants. The other test, the good soil, will sit in the water, and it'll just stay there, and it'll be totally compact. So biology creates this glue called glomalin that holds that aggregate together. And so when it gets in water, it just stays held together. Whereas the bad soil, or the soil that's not as in good a health, doesn't have biology. It doesn't have those glues to hold it together. So the water makes it just slake. The pressure of that water makes it fall apart. And so that test just shows you what happens when rain comes down and it doesn't infiltrate as good. It's not, the soil structure isn't as good, that there's no biology, so that that the plants that are growing in that soil aren't as healthy for you as they could be.
Thank you. So, excuse me. So Gabe talked about the difference between soil when you till it. So that Slake test would also apply to that aspect, yeah?
Yeah, so the tillage breaks the home, like it destroys the home for the biology, just like a D9 cat would go through our house. Same thing with the biology. And then it also breaks those aggregates apart and just makes them disperse, just destroys the aggregates, plus destroys the biology. So there's one bug or biology in the soil, microbiology, that's called the mycorrhizae fungi. And it's a string-like thing that attaches to the plant root and goes way deep in the soil to bring nutrients back to the plant. And that string just gets immediately cut with tillage. And so that is a huge detriment to the plant. Oop, I can't hear you. You must have, there we go.
Yes, I muted because I didn't want to cough in yours and everybody else's ears. Excuse me. So what is the percentage, do you think, of farms that are doing regenerative farming at this time?
Boy, that is a good question. It's probably pretty low, probably maybe 5%, 4%. Although I am seeing it increasing, and I think Gabe probably can attest to that in his travels all over the world. about the level of interest. And we have seen it here in Montana because we've been having soil health workshops for like 12 years now. And we used to do it just traveling around the state of Montana. And in 2020, we felt like we had enough interest that we did a 2-day workshop in Billings and sold out with 420 people.
That's great.
And of course, we had Gabe the first year, so that's quite a draw. But we have sold out last year and I think the year before. And so we just bring in speakers from around the nation as keynotes. But now we have so many people that are practicing regenerative agriculture that we have breakout sessions of Montana farmers and ranchers that just speak to their peers, which is super helpful so it's one thing for me to tell producers, but it's much better to hear from their peers, and then they can ask specific questions. So up here where I'm at in the Great Falls area, we did, little soil health workshops, out in people's fields, and we've done a lot of those. And so we do have a lot of people that are trying it. It can be pretty frustrating in Montana because it's very dry. We don't have a long growing season. So it takes time, whereas in other parts of the nation, it can move a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting to me. I was joking with Gabe, but half joking, that I feel as though regenerative farmers are the new rock stars.
It's really important when you think about just the soil and your food and how interconnected it is, and about our children and our future. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, when I think about the foods, like I have always been somebody, partially because of health reasons in my early 20s, but I have been somebody that reads labels and researches and asks questions and wants to understand. And when things started to change and there started to be, and it was all like under the covers about glyphosate.
Mm.
And I kept thinking, wait a minute, like there's all these gut issues that are happening with children and adults. Something isn't right. And then we started to find out, it started to leak a little bit about glyphosate. And then there's a new chemical that I just read. The EWG just sent out an email with information about another terrible pesticide that is sprayed. But I know that a lot of the moms that listen to this podcast are moms that live in cities. Mm-hmm. One in particular is Los Angeles, which is like this sprawling city. And some people have access to a garden. I love that you do the Green Thumb Chronicles. And some people just have a small little space. So given what you know, and given that I feel like a lot of the moms that listen to this are very, conscious and very caring and very dedicated to health and wellness, how can they, create these, grow crops or grow food that will give their children's immune systems the strength that it needs?
Well, it really is easier than you think. I think it's just knowing exactly, what to do. And the Green Thumb Chronicles I try to line out specific ways of doing things on that. But I think, a lot of us, I read a book by Joel Salatin. I can't remember what it's called, but he talks a lot about, if the world fails, what do you have? And like they have, their freezers full of food because they, butcher animals, and they have all these canned goods. And he just talked about if us as a nation were to take odd areas in our cities, like the land in between the freeways, and turn that into edible trees instead of ornamental trees. And so in line with that, and I have a lady up here that did that. She took out her whole yard. So it's nice to have a green yard, but she turned her yard into her whole garden instead of having. So even if you have a little patch of yard, turn it into something like a garden that you can actually use and eat, and you can make it pretty. It's beneficial to have flowers in your garden anyway, because you want the diversity, and it brings in pollinators and all that stuff. So in the garden, you know, I don't till it, which is important. And so my first question I get is, well, how do you plant when you can't till your garden, right? So there's lots of different ways to get rid of the grass that's growing there or weeds. You can put black plastic over it for 2 weeks. And then you take the black plastic off, and then you just cover it with like hay or maybe grass clippings that you can get from your neighbors. And then how to plant it, I actually just use a pizza cutter. So
Wow.
Very cheap. It's in your kitchen. You might have to buy an extra one because it can bend and break. But it's just about making a slit in the soil.
Mm-hmm.
You just put your seeds in that slit, and then you just close it back up with your fingers. And then just make sure that there is no bare ground, because nature, you know, in nature, the prairies that once were here, they didn't have a lot of bare ground. We've created a lot of bare ground. And wherever there's bare ground, nature wants to put a weed, because weed is nature's Band-Aid. And so if you cover the ground with, you know, whether it's old hay, grass clippings like you can get from your neighbors, leaves, compost. And that also retains the moisture in the soil and creates a cool environment for the biology. So having your soil cover affects soil temperature. It affects evapotranspiration, and it's a weed control. So it's just finding ways that you can plant your garden. And you do want to rotate what you grow around. You don't want to grow it in the same area, because that's what creates disease. So you want to move it around in your garden. So I never plant the same thing in the same area more than 2 years in a row. And then I do incorporate, so I don't fertilize at all. I did have some issues with slugs at first, and so I think and it was nasty. But I think when you're first converting, remember that it didn't get degraded overnight, right? So it's not going to come back immediately. And so I think it takes a while, just like our gut biology, right? We have biology in our gut, and we have to have diversity in our gut, because every, you know, biology in our soil all does different things, right? Or in our gut. The same thing with the soil. So the more diversity of different plants that you have, the more diversity the biology is. And so the pests, the good bugs and the bad bugs are in balance. And when they get out of balance, right, that's when we get sick in our guts, right? And that's when the soil gets sick too. And so it's about having diversity in your garden, having flowers, having, you know, as many different plants as you can. And where you can't add diversity, you can use a cover crop cocktail, which is just a bunch of different species that you would plant that maybe don't have food. I mean, they don't produce food, but they're providing diversity and food for the biology in the soil. So it's just having something planted everywhere in your garden, whether it be a food or a flower or a nitrogen fixing plant, that's all feeding the biology in your soil.
So amazing. It's so fascinating to me that you are so knowledgeable about this, and that this is, you know, you grew up on a family ranch, and you had this desire to explore this part of our ecology, to understand this ecosystem in our world. Like it's so fascinating to me about the soil health. And I think how many people don't pause, they don't stop to think about how important it is to have food that comes from this kind of environment. And even, you know, there's, you know, of course, parents that care very deeply, and they think about where the food comes from, but they don't think about, is it from a regenerative farm? How much, you know, how nutrient dense is this food?
Right.
And
yeah,
there's
one thing that was really alarming to me, I watched a presentation, and I think one of our partners in Understanding Ag talks about it a lot, that we have lost 20 to 30% of the nutrients in our vegetables and meat in the last 20 years.
Wow.
So think about that. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it just relates back to our soils. And if our soils aren't functioning, then we have to use, fertilizer and pesticides and insecticides and all that stuff because it's not functioning the way nature intended it. So it's really just farming or ranching or growing your garden in the way that God and nature intended it to be. And all of the answers really are in nature if you look around.
It's so true. My daughter went to a school where she was outside she could go inside if she wanted, but she was mostly outside for 6, sometimes 7 hours during the day. And what I loved so much is and she loved to have her hands in the dirt, and there were chickens and all this. And what I loved so much is I really think that a child's brain grows differently, and there's more neurons that connect when their hands are in the dirt, when they're literally in nature. Now, I'm not that person. I grew some vegetables when I was a kid, but I haven't done that as an adult. But I think about that a lot, and I care deeply about the food that goes into mine and my family's bodies. And I want other parents to understand the impact, like 20 to 30% loss of nutrients. That's huge.
Right.
And the food, if you think, I read recently that Whole Foods has genetically modified ingredients in their foods. Like there's Whole Foods, which, we won't go down that road, but, how can you do that? And then Bill Gates has purchased so much farmland, and he's like the king of genetically modified.
I know.
It's so interesting, and how wonderful that you're doing it. So when you do it, the technical training, what is that, and how does it work, like with the tribal lands? Because the First Peoples Nation, if anybody has a reverence for the earth, it's the First People. So how does that?
So I recently just did 2 demonstrations on different tribes up here, and I just kind of did the same thing that I do the slake test. So I get these big colanders and I show them that, and then I show them infiltration, like how that affects infiltration. And then I have a rainfall simulator, so I get these large samples of similar soils, but they're all managed different. And it's a very large demonstration, and I put 1 inch of rain on it, and you can see what runs off compared to what infiltrates. And then we talk about the different types of management, what they did different, and how it affects water infiltration. And then I have spoke in like the Native American schools in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. And I've done the slake test there, but I've also done the Cocoa Puff demonstration because that's kind of fun, right? And basically, I talk about Cocoa Puffs being like soil aggregates, and they have that sugar around that coats it so it doesn't get soggy in your milk, right? And that sugar is like the glomalin, or the glue that the biology holds the aggregates together. And so you have, like, I do a clear cup of Cocoa Puffs, and I have another cup that has crushed Cocoa Puffs. And I pour milk into the one that's the Cocoa Puffs are, still, they're not crushed. And you can see how milk infiltrates in between those Cocoa Puffs. But in the one where it's crushed, the milk just sits on the top because it can't infiltrate because we've crushed all those soil aggregates. And so I do that, and then they all get Cocoa Puffs. But that is not what we want to be teaching, really, is giving them Cocoa Puffs. But I talk about my garden. And some of them have gardens and can relate, their grandparents' gardens and what they've planted and what their favorite vegetable is. But I think a lot of people, we got away from gardening. I know as a child, we gardened on the farm or ranch, but then, you go away to college and you get away from it. And I always kind of liked it, but I think a lot of people, you talk to a lot of people and say, yeah, my mom and dad used to garden, but I don't anymore. And I think it's time consuming. And maybe, you just don't remember how to do it. It's really fun. I do it with my children and my grandchildren, and they might complain about it now, but they did like it when, they get to plant and they get to watch the plants grow, and then they get to go pick the food and eat the food. And it's all a cool learning experience that I think they get excited about.
I think it's a great activity for kids, really great. That to see that tender shoot that comes out of the soil is so exciting. And to know that you planted it and then it's growing and then you can pick it and you can eat it. There's a neighborhood garden not far from where I am, where a lot of the kids' schools go, and they get to see all of the different vegetables and fruits that grow. So are any of your children, did they follow in your footsteps, and are they involved in this industry?
They aren't. My son probably was the one who did the most. He used to go to range camp with me and watch me do the demonstrations, and he used to have to learn to do soil, and he had to learn his plants. My middle daughter did a little bit. My son, though, is probably the one that's most interested in science. He's going to be a chiropractor. So he's very interested. He's played football, and both and my middle daughter too, they're very into nutrition. So they really watch what they eat. They exercise, they do some fasting. And so I've, had a little impact on them. So that always makes me feel good. They're looking at labels and, well, Mom, did you see what was in this? And so we talk about it a lot. So it's fun. They joke around about it because they kind of get tired of hearing me talk about what they shouldn't be eating. But
isn't it true? It's so true. I know. My daughter will say the same thing to me sometimes, and she'll say, like, she just moved into her own apartment after graduating college, and and she was telling what she was eating, and I said, oh. And she said, I know, it's got glyphosate, Mom. When I'm eating it. And I was like, okay, well, would you like some biomedic to rid yourself of the glyphosate? Rid your But it's so fascinating to just see it. And then also I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and what Gabe is doing. And I know that he's got a product that's coming out, but just to have the opportunity, like the films.
Oh, it's seeing like that infiltration simulator that I do in the slake test. I mean, it really opens people's eyes just to see, because you don't know what you don't know until you see that. And that's like for years, and even all through college, they didn't teach that until I saw that slake test. And then I started, researching and following Gabe and, going to his farm and ranch and all that stuff. So
that's incredible. Isn't that fascinating? You can spend so much time in college, but then you leave college, or you have you get an internship or a job, and then all of a sudden you're seeing something that's really different and might even bump up against what you're learning in college. Right. And you say, wait a minute, this
is not making sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I like what you talked about. I mean, questioning things.
Yeah.
I think that's important in this day and age, to question what's in your food and what you're putting in your body and making sure it's okay.
And how it all intersects. Like I was thinking as you were talking, and you were talking about the soil, and then I was thinking about irrigation, and then I was thinking about water. Because if you don't clean if your soil isn't healthy and it gets into the water system, which then gets into I don't know a lot of people that drink tap water, but there's some people that tap water is the only water that they can access, right? Which in itself is like, why? Why can't we all be, getting our food from regenerative farms? Why can't we have animals that are humanely cared for and plants that are really thriving? Like, what is that? Why do we want to have such a sick care system?
Yeah.
And instead of wellness. So I think about that a lot, and I think about how that's interconnected. And then I had the pleasure of being on a dialogue with Nicole Shanahan, who's involved with Common Ground, and also is running as vice president with RFK Jr. And she made a comment about hearing someone say about they take our fertility away and then they sell it back to us, and then talked about the land. Right? So we have the soil that isn't nutrient, the water that isn't clean, the seeds that affect the microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
We have
That's crazy
pharmaceutical industry involved in our and then the food, and then there's you and Gabe. Right? Like that.
Gabe's doing a great job of educating, and he spends so much time, just trying to get everywhere he can to help people learn and educate. Yeah, he's phenomenal.
He is. What I was at the screening and I got to meet him, and he was just so sweet, and I just loved talking to him and listening to him, and he's so humble, and he is so open to educating, and so much of it has to do with education. So what you're doing these presentations and bringing it, and then Green Thumb Chronicles. Yep. Yes. Right. Which I would love for you to say, how did you come to do that? And can you say more about that so people can go and find it and follow you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can just type in Green Thumb Chronicles Understanding Ag under YouTube. So I work part-time for Understanding Ag as a consultant, and a lot of the consultants have their own farm or ranch, which I'm not able to. And so I practice what I preach in my garden. And so that is kind of where I test things out and talk to people. And so a lot of people, like in my career, I've spoken to a lot of gardening groups, and I find that in a lot of female groups, farmer and ranching wives, and they're always really interested in the gardening part. And I think, since COVID, people have been more aware of their food and want to know where it comes from and to be able to provide for themselves. And so it's just a way that everybody can contribute, right, to regenerative. You don't have to own a farm or ranch. If you have your own garden, you can practice some of these principles and provide food for your family and be doing your own part in the environment. So that's kind of where I came from. And then my husband helped me with the name. So that was nice. And then my son has helped me video, and my husband has too. So it's kind of a family affair. So it's fun. And then my granddaughter, helped me plant the garden and helps me pick the things in the garden. She loves to go, let's go look at the garden after we come home from a weekend so we can see what's growing. So it's fun. So that's kind of how I came up with it. I just think there's a lot of interest in growing your own food because where it came from, how you grew it, and it can be much healthier than what you find in the grocery store.
Yes. Well, and do you do an episode every week, every 2 weeks, once a month?
It's probably close to once a month, just like when my garden's ready for when I want to talk about it. So like the first, I did no-till potatoes, which are fabulous and so easy. So I'd say that's the greatest thing about no-till gardening is no-till potatoes, because you just set the potatoes on top of the ground, so you don't dig, and then you put residue over the top of them. So there again, that can be old hay that a farmer or rancher doesn't use. It can be grass clippings. It could probably be a combination of the two. It could be compost. And the nice thing is the potatoes grow up. And then if you want to just harvest a couple potatoes, you just move the residue side and grab the potato, and the potato still is growing. So it's super cool. And they're cleaner because you're not digging in the dirt because they're just sitting on top of the soil. So that was one that I did. And then I showed how to plant. And then I'm kind of just going through the different soil health principles and how you apply them in the garden. So next time I'll talk about the pollinators, putting flowers in your garden to attract the native pests that prey upon the native predators that prey upon the pests. So there's like a black wasp that preys upon the slugs. So you just bring in the flowers, and then that brings in the wasp to take care of the slug problems, which is what happened to me. So
I have one of my clients has a garden. They were, I don't remember what it was that they had planted, but they had put a fence around it. They had done all these, precautionary measures to protect it, and it kept getting eaten. And then the other day she said it was mice that the mouse were getting in, and they were doing it. So she took care of it. But it's so interesting to have the ecosystem between the insects and the animals and the soil and the different crops.
Yes, it is cool. Yeah, I have raccoons that come in the fall to try to steal my corn. But I know people have had issues with even rabbits can be kind of harmful. I do have mine fenced away from the deer just because they would annihilate it in a night, unfortunately.
As beautiful as they are, we have to. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. How about, I'm curious, how about people? I've seen people have like window boxes. Are they able to, have you ever seen like those? They're more narrow rather than like if somebody doesn't have a backyard or a yard, is that, can they still grow?
Yep. You can do all that. Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
And there it's probably easier because like you can't till those boxes anyway because they're, pretty small. And so it's just making sure that, it's covered. You don't want any bare soil. And when you, plant something, just like if you're doing a tomato transplant, of course, you're going to have to dig in the soil. And I do that too. It's just trying to minimize the disturbance wherever you can. I know a lot of people think that they have to turn their compost. Well, turning their compost is disturbance. And so I probably will do a segment on static composting, so that, and I have a little backyard composter so I can show people how that's done also.
That's wonderful. Wow. That's so helpful that you do that. Because so many times when I talk to people, what they'll say to me, especially busy moms, right? Like working moms, they'll say, I really want to do this, Wendy, but I don't even know where to start. And I don't know how to do this. So the fact that you're able to break it down and make it doable is so wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for all.
Yeah, and it helps me to talk to you because then I need to get more out and make sure I stay on it. And it's always good to have, questions from people because sometimes I've been doing it for 13 years. So, where I started from, I forget, some of those things that I learned along the way. So, yeah.
Well, I will absolutely, anytime you want to have like a conversation about, that particular area of what you do, I'm happy to
that would be good.
Get back on and have a conversation with you because I really do sincerely believe with what we are. There's so much swirling in the world.
Yes, there's a lot to it and a lot to the soil that, you just don't think about until you're educated and learn about it.
Yeah. So we have you who can bring this information to people, and Gabe. And
yes.
Then, to very consistently and steadfastly educate people so that they have the confidence. They can, okay, well, maybe this didn't work. Oh, that worked. That was amazing. And let's keep doing more of that. So how can people reach you?
You can just, in Understanding Ag, I have my contact information. I'm listed as a consultant for them. And so they can reach me that way. And that's probably the easiest way. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anything else you want to share with the folks before we close out?
It's so important just to look at your food and just to know where it comes from, and really just to let people know that backyard gardening is not as challenging as you think it may be, because you probably just have all the things that you need right there to do it. So
Yes. And how good it is to get your hands in the soil, and how regenerative, how healing it is.
It is healing. When I spend time in my garden, I often tell, I think I don't know specifically what it is, but they talk about grounding, and that's just you walking on bare soil with your bare feet.
Exactly.
Be very grounding and make you feel better. And the vitamin D that you can get, and really the biology in the soil is good to have on your hands, because it all goes together.
Yes.
It's all natural. It's all nature.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Marni.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, so good to talk with you. And I will make sure I'm serious about having another conversation.
Okay, that'd be great.
So we can do that. So don't go away, even though I'm going to take you off the stage for just this moment. All right, everyone, thank you for being here. Please make sure to share this episode with all of your mama friends and your papa friends, everyone who can benefit. If you have a child in your life, or you have had any experience with wanting your body to be better, make sure to share this. And this is a 3-part series, so you're going to have this opportunity to hear from Gabe, and hear from Marni, and then Christine. And I will continue to bring you information that will support you and your children in thriving. So until next time, remember that you are powerful beyond measure, loved beyond description, and a force for good in the world. So go forward and spread your magic. I'll see you soon. Peace and blessings.